Today, I want to talk about living from the soul. What does that mean? What does it mean to live from soul, to speak from soul, to experience this human experience through the lens and the perspective of the soul? Part of it entails getting to know who we are as a human being, our personality, our wounds, our triggers, our fears, our insecurity. This is the cultivating the emotional intelligence that we have within ourselves when we begin to understand the language of our emotions. And our emotions are also I would say, one of the most direct routes to understanding the language of our soul, because it goes into the realm of feeling, of energy, and into the unseen, out of the rational and the logic, and into the expanse of the mystery and the wonder that actually is existence. So today I really want to talk about, what is it like to live from soul? What does that look like? What does that feel like? How do we do it, basically? So let's dive in. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. When I was younger, there was an intuitive that told me, Corinne, you can see straight into a person's soul. And I never thought much of it, but I had always had this feeling, this sense that when I met someone, whether it was just in friendship or in relationship, that it was like I could see through the veil. I could see beyond the personality into the true essence of who they are, kind of seeing behind the scenes, beyond the sets, the set and the scenes of the stage, you could say. But I didn't do so much with it. I certainly have always been very intuitive and brought my intuition into my coaching. I am not one for notes, because I have always profoundly trusted what gets channeled through me, what moves through me when I'm receptive, when I'm doing a talk or a workshop or working with someone one-to-one. For me, that is directly correlated to my relationship with my higher self, with my soul, and with Source itself. I remember when I was younger, maybe 11, 12 years old, she became a friend of mine. She was the massage therapist for when I was a ballet dancer. And we would have these really profound, very etheric, spiritual, soulful conversations. And I remember her saying, Corinne, how do you know all of this at such a young age? And the thing is I think I came into this life with a certain level of remembrance. I remember my birth. I remember part of being born, being birthed. And I think having this, remembrance of who we truly are. Not that we're just this flesh suit, but really, truly, who are we beyond the physical? And I think I'm not any more special than anybody else. I think I just came in with the remembrance of that in part. And we've been indoctrinated to forget. We've been indoctrinated to be disconnected from our higher selves, from Source, from that which we truly are. So it's not that it's like a special gift. It's just that I think some of us come in remembering more than others, and I think we are all fully capable of remembering. And it's what I feel I'm here for. Like, part of my life's mission and purpose is to be a guide, to be of support, to be of service. And I feel like, I'm humbly bowing down to that, to be of service, to help people remember. And so the way my work is, what I'm being very beckoned to come into, and I keep on hearing it again and again in my meditations, is to do the soul readings, to work directly with the soul, because I do think we're entering a time where the collective, we as people, are more receptive to that. We have a greater willingness to access that part of ourselves, because I think we're recognizing that the old ways aren't working anymore. They feel meaningless. They feel restrictive. They feel too small. As I've been mentioning, we're in the year of the snake, and it's shedding old skins and seeing these old paradigms crumble. And it truly is, whatever you want to call it, an awakening, an ascension. For me, it's simply a remembrance. We're remembering who we truly are. One of the analogies that I've always used that I find just the most helpful is it's like looking at the essence of who you are, the soul of who you are is the canvas of the painting. That canvas is always there, right? It's always there in the background. And what you choose to paint on it, that is the expression of your human experience, your thoughts, your emotions, your experiences, what you move through in life. You can paint over it, you can kind of erase it, you can morph it into something else, but the canvas, the blank canvas, is forever behind it. That is the essence of who you are. And part of doing this work is to have the observation, the awareness, the consciousness, and the connection to the canvas, to the part of you that is witnessing all of this. I love I don't remember who it was. I never remember. It's like, when you see snippets come up on Instagram, these short reels, that this man was talking about how a really great kind of test is when you say something I don't know if I shared this before, but you say something in your mind. And then you go, well, who said that? And not only who said that, but who heard that? You didn't say it out loud, right? But it was said in your mind and it was heard in your mind. Well, we say the mind, but let's just put it like in the context of the area of your head. But to be honest, when we feel something, it tends to be more correlated with the body, right? Because feelings and emotions can arise from sensations in the body. And when we're working with embodiment and we're working with emotions, at least the way that I like to work with them, is to bring you into your body so that you're feeling the sensation, you're feeling the emotion, you're feeling the energy. And all of these things, as I said in the beginning, it gives us a pathway to have direct access to our soul, because our soul, personally, I believe that our soul resides kind of everywhere, right? It is so much larger than our body. So you could say it's infinite and unquantifiable, right? We can't measure how big is it. But if it were to reside in the body, I would feel that it resides in the heart. I've actually heard that it rests just behind the heart. You could say consciousness is in the mind. A lot of people think that consciousness is in the brain, but I think they're actually recognizing, even through science, that it's more likely to be in the area of the heart, because the heart gives us off a much larger, expansive magnetic field, the vibration. The science has already shown us that there's more signaling from heart to mind than from mind or brain to heart. So the real center and core of who we are, we've really been thinking it's the brain, it's the mind. That's the most important part of being human. It's an important part, but it's not the most important part. But we're seeing that more like the central station seems to be the heart. And of course, as I've talked about in the past, we have 3 centers of intelligence, that being the gut, the heart, and the mind. And we're in our most powerful when those 3 are in conversation. They're in alignment. They're in coherence with each other. They're in harmony with one another. All of these, to me, when we are tapped in and tuned into our being on all levels, physical, emotional, psychological, energetic, spiritual, that then we are working in the realm of the spirit and soul that is holding all of this. Like if we were to look at it all as concentric circles, I think it's even Indian philosophy will look at the various bodies. We're not just the physical body. We have the cellular body. You could go micro to macro, right? The cellular body, all the memory that lies in our cells and our atoms and our DNA and our chromosomes, all of these things. And then you come out to the physical, and then you can go out to the auric and the energetic and the etheric, right? There's all sorts. There's, I don't even know how many numbers of bodies we have, because that's maybe out for, that's still, the jury hasn't come in on that one yet. And does it matter how many? No, not for me. What matters is that we have the awareness and the experience that we are so much vaster than just this body. So what does it look like? What does it mean to live from your soul? I like to begin from the inside out, right? The micro to the macro. So for us to understand what it is to live from soul, we have to understand what it is to live from our personality, our ego, you could say, our human. And the reason why that's really important to bring awareness to, and to cultivate the observer that can watch over, that can witness our human experience, is so that we're not over-identified and kind of not able to see the forest for the trees when we are at the mercy of our ego, of our personality, of our shadow side of our personality, our wounding, our triggers, our behaviors, our kind of autopilot behavior, right? For us to understand who we are as a human being, we have to be able to witness it and observe it and not be identified with it. If you've been following me so far, you know that I talk a lot about the kind of the unnecessary suffering that we have is when we identify with our feeling, with our emotional state, with our experience. When we say, I am that, rather than I'm feeling this. Because the I'm feeling this allows enough space to be able to observe, oh, this is an experience that I'm having as a human being. Right now, the experience of being human is I feel sadness, or I feel pain and suffering, or I feel anger, or I feel fatigue, or I feel confusion, or I feel elation and excitement and joy or pleasure or pain. All of these things are the paint of the painting, right? And they are painting a masterpiece, you could say, or just a beautiful work of art of what it is to be human. But when we're in the kind of quagmire of our humanness and our unconscious behaviors, it's very hard to be able to witness that, because there's no space in between. We just think we are that. So that's where people go into, I am rejected, I am abandoned, I am neglected, I am unworthy, I am unlovable, I am insignificant. It's all of the identifications that keep us small and then keep us in that kind of quagmire of our human experience. And there's a lot of suffering there because there's no relief, there's no respite, there's no space from that, there's no breathing room, right? So we have to first go in and do the inner work and really understand, well, what ticks me, right? What triggers me? Why am I like this? Why do I react like that to certain things? Why do I have this pattern in relationship? Why do I have this relationship with my worth? Whether it's in a relationship or a friendship or in work or in just in general in my life, why am I the way that I am? Without any judgment, but with the curiosity of who am I? And what drives me? What motivates me? And then am I being motivated from the shadow of the unseen and the unconscious within myself that's coming from wounding and from pain and from limitation of who I believe myself to be or who I should be in society's eyes? Or have I worked through that and alchemized all of that into, I get to be who I authentically am, and I get to be in the expression of my authenticity. I get to be in the expression of my unique soul self. So once you go in and you do the excavation, you discover who you are and you discover all the parts that make you human, that are beautiful. Your wounding makes you human. It's part of the arc of life. You come in, you forget through your life experience and through sometimes your wounding and your pain and your suffering and your struggle and the challenge, you grow and you dig in and you re-remember who you are. And in that remembrance, you've evolved. You've evolved through that journey to remember what you forgot, but which you always knew. Does that make sense? So there is a purpose for your human experience. But the purpose is to also get to the other side of the bridge so that you remember that which you really are. And I think now we're in a collective time where we don't have to be so heavy in the amnesia. We can actually have the experience now. We're graduating into, oh, you can be here and remember again who you are. And you can still have this human experience, but it's connected to that which you truly are, that is beyond just this dimension, just this realm, just this body, just this planet, right? We're getting into multidimensionality. We're getting into intergalactic. We're getting into immortal, you could say, because we're moving beyond birth and death of just the human body and into the infinite and immortal life of the soul. So once you've gone in, and you have a good enough blueprint and understanding of who you are as your personality, as your human self, whatever your name is, and you understand the language of your emotions, you start to understand what energy feels like in your body, in your being, moving through your emotions. You get to zoom out a little bit further, or you get to go more into the canvas that's behind the painting, and you go, oh, who's witnessing all of this? Who's observing all of this? Who's taking this in and being the container for all of this from a much vaster level? And that is connecting to your soul. Your soul is the part that can guide you, that can give you a point of reflection, that can steer you in ways. You know, last week I talked about, where does fate and destiny meet free will? And I think this is a good conversation that comes from that, because I think part of that question is actually lies in the way that we converse with our soul. Because it's like our human self is the vehicle, it's the car. Remember was it Spina, I forget his name now, that I think it was him that was talking about how, you know, we're like the car, right? The soul is the driver, the human is the car. But you don't get into a car and think, I am the car. You know that you are the driver that is driving the car. You are not the car. We don't merge with the car, right? So I think the example he was giving, the analogy what he was giving is that, you know, the car is like the human vessel, but that which is driving the car is the soul. So our job as in our human form is to be able to take action. We take action from the guidance of our soul, which is the driver. So you could say, you know, we have free will, how we respond to the call or the beckoning of our soul. Maybe sometimes we can interfere with it or go against it by going like, no, I'm not going to make that choice. That is where I have free will. But actually the fate and the destiny path is led and guided by our soul, and I would say source, creator of all that is, spirit, universe. Well, I say it's even beyond universe, God, whatever you want to call it. And we're kind of in tandem, right? It's all about collaboration and partnership. And the more that we understand how to do this with ourselves, as within, so without, you know, we'll be able to do that more as a collective, as a human community, right? So I see it, I kind of understand the cross in a different way now, right? We're aligning ourselves with the above, into ourselves, connecting into the earth, but the other plane, the other axis is how we then spread that out through us as a global community, right? And we have to connect in and up and in and down. There's the descension before the ascension, right? You have to go down in and excavate and figure out who are you in order to ascend and remember who you truly are. And then from the axis point that I would say is through the heart, then it's how do I bring all of that knowledge, wisdom, knowing, gnosis, embodiment, and connect to other humans in that field, right? So you have the vertical axis and the horizontal axis. But if we're all focusing on the vertical axis, we'll be able to create that horizontal axis that connects each and every one of us and create such a beautiful network and web, you know, that is really heart to heart. But the heart has to connect to the higher self. And that really is, as I've been saying it so many times, that really is the portal. It's not going to happen through the rational, logical mind. So one of the ways to live from soul is live in your heart more. Feel things more. Receive through absorption of energy. And what I mean by absorption is like, we think that we just hear and see through our eyes and hear from our ears. But actually, we're in a field, and our body, and most especially our heart, because it has such a vast magnetic field, this is scientifically proven, we actually feel through our heart's magnetic field what is going to come before we're consciously, cerebrally, cognitively aware of it. So that says a lot right there, right? That when I mean absorption, it's like it's as if you had all of these tentacles out in your fields that can feel what's coming into it before you see it, before you hear it, before you know it, cognitively, right? You sense and feel it. Cats, look at animals, right? Animals can sense when there's going to be an earthquake because they're much more connected to the vibrational field than we are. We can get there, but we have to turn that part of us on. So if you want to be more connected to your soul and living from your soul, you need to access your heart. You need to access feeling. You need to take in your information that is, sorry, when I say you need, I don't mean to be patronizing, but the invitation, the pathway that at least I've come across, that I've found, and of course you can take it or leave it as feels right and whatever works for you, but I can only speak from my experience, is we're reading things through our energetic field, through our body, through feeling, through sensing, through intuiting. Where this is, part of the evolution of being human is that we're evolving beyond just the mind, or that the mind isn't the master, but it's a servant, it's a tool, it's a remarkable tool that can be used for good or for bad, right? But actually, when we drop into the body and realize, it's like opening up the kaleidoscope, from going through this really pinpointed tunnel vision to think, oh, this is the only way that I can see, hear, learn, taste, feel. And we're opening it wide open to being like, no, you can take in all that information through a much, much broader field. If you connect into your heart and into your body and into the energetic body. And that's how you're gathering information, but not information as knowledge, but information as knowing. And that is the difference of if you're just staying in your mind versus if you are in your body being an energetic and soul field, I will say. Because you're filtering everything from the outside in. The mind, the brain is actually kind of the last one to be in the know, right? It's first being filtered through the soul, then through the spirit body. The etheric, the energetic, the feeling, then the physical, then the cellular. What comes first? I'm not going to get into all of that, but just as an example of the concentric circles and the trajectory of which we get information. So on a practical level, again, I'm going to invite you to have a consistent practice of sitting with yourself. I'm not going to call it meditation because of the connotations it has. Sit with yourself. And the more you do that, the more often, and I don't mean you have to do it for an hour. I do it when I wake up in the morning. I sit up and I do it in my bed. And if I've woken up in time, I'll give myself 20 minutes. If I'm late, I'll give myself 10 minutes. If I have more time on the weekend, it might be a half an hour. I've got a child, so I am slightly limited. If I had, all the time in the world, who knows how long I would go. But the point isn't the length, it's the consistency. Even if you do 5 minutes every single day. And I do have, I have things that help me get into that space. I like to do some pranayama, which is the alternative nostril breathing a little bit, a few rounds of that. I'll do the Kundalini breath where you pull in the breath and you retain from the perineum to the pineal gland. That's a Joe Dispenza thing. Sometimes I'll do the breath of fire, a little bit of Wim Hof. And when I say that, it sounds like very extravagant, but I might do 1 or 2 rounds of each. And then I like to, ground into the earth and, up above and to go through the chakras. And then for me, that is like a place of really landing in my body and being connected to that vertical axis of above and below and within my heart. And then the horizontal axis, which is really sending love and peace and just spirit to all beings, across the everything, not just the planet, but the everything and everywhere all at once, right? But, find what works for you personally. And then it's really about just being in my feeling body, in my energetic body. And sometimes I have thoughts that come up. I tend to also like to connect to my guides, to my higher self. I often ask my higher self, what is it that, what message do you need to, would you like to give me today? And I'm open to receiving that. Sometimes it's a different being or entity that comes in, certainly in this year where I've had a very, very dedicated practice. Sometimes I'm surprised by what comes through. And for me, this is just, it's cultivating and flexing that muscle, which we have, but that's an atrophy. And that muscle is just really connecting to our soul self and listening. It's about becoming receptive. We're very non-receptive. We're in the masculine a lot of the times, right? We're doing, we're penetrating, we're achieving, we're figuring out, where it's very kind of the arrow that's being shot out. And actually what we're going into when we're sitting with is becoming the bowl, the receiver, the receptacle. And the energy, instead of flowing out in the form of, I need to achieve this and I need to go out to do this, is actually allowing the energy to flow in. And, the reciprocation of both is important, right? This is the balance of yin and yang and masculine and feminine and, all of the polarities and dualities, you could say, and finding that middle point and that still point and that 0 point, which is the point of all creation, in the midst of all of that. Right? So the practice of sitting with and being with, allows you to understand, firstly, you will probably begin with your physical body and your psychological body, because your thoughts will come up and your physical sensations will come up first and foremost. Then you can probably drop into your feeling body and get to feel emotions and sensations that they're connected to. Then maybe the next concentric circle would be your energy field. What does my energy feel like? What happens to my energy when I think this, when I feel this, when I have this emotion, when I have this sensation? And the energetic goes into a much more expansive state of being, which then brings us into spirit and soul. And, the difference between hearing our soul and hearing our mind is our mind can tell us a good story. Our mind can be judgmental. Our mind can be unkind. The soul speaks very clearly, very succinctly, very directly, but always with a warmth, never with judgment. And it's not dualistic in that way. But it can be very clear. It can come in with a samurai sword, but it's all for your highest and greatest good. So living from soul is actually less about doing and more about being, less about speaking and more about listening. It's really about listening, and we have to get more still and more quiet in order to hear it. And we live in a world where we are bombarded with distraction for our focus and attention. They're vying for our attention and our focus, and the noise, the physical noise, the psychological noise, even the spiritual noise, all of the contradictions and the conspiracies and there's so much manipulation. And so it's very hard to hear amidst that static. And this is why I will say often, go into nature. Was it yesterday or the day before? No, I think it was yesterday. I felt very odd. I'd had the day before, it had such an expansive day. It was so beautiful. And then the next day was like the contraction after the expansion. And, or as someone was describing, it's like the hangover, the spiritual, energetic hangover of feeling so expansive. And then the contraction came in. And I could do a whole podcast just on that, of what happens when we really open up into our vastness and get excited about things and really let our soul lead. And then the contraction is the mind and the ego that goes, who are you to think that that's possible? That's not realistic. I will try and do an episode on that, because it's an interesting one. And it's interesting to see how the saboteur comes in and how we put ourselves back into a little box and into a little cage again. But anyway, so I was experiencing that. And then I actually had seen a video about just how quickly grounding, when we think, we know that if we put our bare feet on the ground, we're receiving the magnetic energy of the earth and all of the electrons and all of that, and just the effect that has on our bloodstream, on our brain, on our gut, on our entire being. But somebody was saying, like, how fast, how quickly does that happen? And they're saying immediate. It's immediate. So I took my daughter and I to the sea and, just put my feet in the sand and in the water, and just the immediate grounding and the relief and the exhalation. It's like, wow, so this is why I really recommend get into nature as often as you can. Even if it's just like you're in the middle of the city, but you go to the park and you put your bare feet on the grass, go lean or sit up against a tree. When you start, I remember when I was young, and, I'm so glad that I was a child of the 80s before all of this technological stuff, because I have memories of going out and playing in the forest or going by the creek, seeing the deers and spending a lot of time by myself and just listening and feeling and being in tune with. And I think, I used to live in California by the redwood trees, and I used to speak to them. I used to really hear them. And some people would be like, oh, that's some hippy dippy woo woo shit, Corinne. Like, no, I heard things. I heard things from the tree. I used to live by Greenwich Park in London. And that's where I lived when I was pregnant and gave birth to my daughter. And I used to always go to this one beautiful oak tree in Greenwich Park. And I would hear her speak to me, and I would always, I'd call her the grandmother tree. And she spoke to me of my birth the morning that evening my waters broke. And she spoke to me that morning of my birth and kind of gave me a message that I will never forget. And that evening, my waters broke. So, if you don't believe in that communication, go out and try it for yourself. But it's not going to work until you're still enough to be able to receive and listen. So if you listen to nature, that is a part of you living from soul, because the language of your soul is energetic, it's telepathic, it's feeling based. It's nonverbal. I mean, sometimes you might hear it in your mind it might sound like a voice that's being spoken. It depends on if you're clairvoyant, clairsentient, clairaudient, all of these. It can come in through different channels. There's just different streams, right? And I find that I oscillate between, sometimes I see visions, sometimes I hear things, sometimes it's just a knowing or a feeling. All of this can only be found if we find the moments with ourselves, to be with ourselves in silence and in stillness, as the witness, as the observer, as the feeler, as the experiencer, knowing that we're in tandem and collaboration with our human self, our soul self, and source itself. And all of consciousness and all of the energy. And, we're learning so much more about plasma and these like plasma orbs coming into our field. And everything is in communication with itself and with each other and one another. So this is why I say it's less about doing and it's more about being. It's less about speaking and it's more about listening. We're learning to listen. If you learn to listen, the language of your soul will make itself known. And you need to know what that is for you personally and uniquely as your own unique, authentic drop of the ocean of consciousness. So living from soul is about dropping down and dropping in and listening, being, feeling. And then you're going to receive information in a very, very different way because you're absorbing that information through the field rather than trying to figure it out and analyze it through your brain, which is just a very small, it's like kind of thinking that just one part of the car is the entire car. And it's like, oh no, that's just one part, it's like the gas pedal. That's not the whole car. There's all this crap. There's all this stuff in the boot, in the, the engine of the car underneath the hood, right? So we're like that. We've been living from a very, very pinpoint perspective of existence, and we're broadening and expanding and recognizing, oh my God, we're vast. We're powerful. And I think this is a beautiful and actually vitally important time to do this because, if you've been hearing people say this is a time of waking up, it's of utmost importance that we do. But it's kind of really hard to fully wake up unless we awaken to ourselves, to who we truly, truly are as the canvas behind the painting, and not get stuck in the muck of the paint. Because if we really, truly want to change the world, it can no longer happen. Like, we've played this game for so long. It can't happen by playing the same rules of the same game. The game needs to be over. And remembering who we truly are brings that game to an end. And then we don't have to get stuck in the drama and the division and, the pain and the suffering that comes through living in that kind of paradigm of fear and division and hatred and all of that stuff. You come into the realm of your soul and you begin to live from soul, and life takes on a very different perspective. And what is important takes on a totally different meaning. And the actions you take are motivated by a completely different source of inspiration. And it's no longer about the very two-dimensional, I say two-dimensional 3D world because it's flat. It's like a piece of paper. Whereas when you puff it out into beyond three-dimensional, but like 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th dimensional, wow, it becomes so rich and so fulfilling and so expansive and so liberating. Just reminds me, I'm going to bring this to a close, but it reminds me of I woke up in the middle of the night and I went back to sleep listening to this theta brainwave music. And in my dream, I was flying. But in that moment, as I was flying, it wasn't just a flying dream. I was like, oh, I'm doing it. I'm having an out-of-body experience. Okay, right. I want to go to the soul records. Like, I was having a very almost kind of lucid dream because I was trying to make my being, my astral body go somewhere. I was like, okay, this is where I want to command to go. And unfortunately, that was the end of it. I couldn't remember. So I probably jumped back into my body. But I don't know. Why am I sharing that? Because the veil is thin, my friends. And that feeling of the expansiveness when we're not in the density of our body and we're flying like that. And that's what we can access. And that's what we can remember in this form. And it doesn't just have to be a dream, or it doesn't have to be just a near-death experience, or it doesn't have to be on the other side of death of this form. It can be in the here and now. And that is what is so phenomenal about these times that we're in. And don't get me wrong, sometimes I'm like, why the hell did I come during these times? It's like, this sucks. And then there's other moments like I'm feeling now where it's like, wow, this is amazing. This is awesome. To be here with the remembrance of who we truly are is incredible. So the invitation is just to start flexing this muscle and taking the time to go into stillness and to listen. To do everything that I've described about. You might still have to begin with doing the inner work. That's fine. We're all at different points in our path. It's not a race, right? You can take as much time as you want. But then to begin to cultivate this relationship with your soul, to begin to hear it and listen and witness and observe and see through the perspective of your soul. And this is why I think I'm doing the soul readings more, because it's like directly accessing your soul and seeing your life through the lens and perspective of your soul. I think we're at that point where we can do that now. And that's going to bring us to a whole new level that I don't know where that's going to take us, but it's exciting, right? So the invitation is just very, very simple today. Maybe re-listen to this if you need to, maybe take down some notes, but of kind of how I laid out the potential path, but see if that feels right for you. But do the things that bring you into a greater state of being, of listening, and of connection, to nature, to your inner nature, and to your spirit and soul and essence and the source and creator of all that is. So I'm going to leave it at that for today, and just wishing you well on that journey and that experience, because it's a beautiful and exciting one, especially if that feels like unknown, uncharted territory. Have a fun adventure. And as always, you know where to find me if you need the guidance. But yeah, I'll leave it at that. And just as always, always, always take it or leave it as feels right for you, and loving you from afar. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.